Welcome to another episode of the Seven Figure Flipping podcast. Today it gets to be just me, Dr. Sheri Fluellen. Adam is on a flight doing some awesome things. And what I wanted to talk about today is unpack for you one of the first flips that I ever did. And it's kind of also the worst flip I ever did. A lot of times we hear people talking about the awesome things that they're doing in real estate investing and flipping and just in life in general. Social media is all about presenting ourselves in the best possible light. So I want to counterbalance that with letting you into a flip gone wrong. And it was horrible. It cost us money. It was painful years of our life. But I want to share it with you because there are definitely some lessons that I learned through the process. And if you can learn a little bit of it too, that would be great. Or maybe it just will help you feel better about a bad flip that's happened for you. So this actually started in 2020, which was part of the issue because if you were in real estate in 2020, you know that was a pretty good year. So here are the details. We bought this house in August of 2020. It was on market on the MLS. My husband and I are both investors and realtors. So I was able to get all the details on this property. The reason it caught my eye is that it was listed for only $75,000. This is in Wyoming, and Wyoming is actually, even though it's the least populated state in the nation with under 500,000 with the entire state, this property was way below what we typically see on the MLS. The average price in the Cheyenne, Wyoming or Laramie County market is at the time, it was a little under 400,000. So a property for 75,000 was quite unusual. And on top of that, it was rural and had acreage, which is hugely desirable in Wyoming. The reason people move to Wyoming is because they want acreage. They want to be left alone with their guns and and horses and all of that. So having a property on almost 8 acres for 75,000 was crazy. So immediately I was interested. Same day I ran out there, I took a look at it, and that house was rough. It's what we would call a homestead. It was built in, I think it was around 1920. It was probably built, the little house itself, there was about 500 square feet that was original. There was a second floor that was created kind of in the attic space, and that was less than 200 square feet. And then the basement, which was really rough, although still had a little living area in it, was about 300 square feet. And so there was this little add-on as well that happened at some point. So the whole property itself, the 3 floors was about 1,200 square feet. And it was really, really rough, but this was literally our first flip. We had already had the idea of maybe we should start flipping. We've been doing real estate investing for over a decade. We've been realtors. We have knowledge, why not? This seems like the obvious next step. So I put an offer in at their asking price, and it was accepted within 24 hours. And so we got to work on doing our due diligence. The offer was an as-is offer. And so we didn't expect them to do any repairs or anything. It was the son of the family that built it that was currently living there. And through our due diligence period, we found that there actually wasn't a septic system, and which really shocked me. And so as we kind of dug into what that meant, the sewer was being piped out. We could see the sewer line getting piped out of the basement wall, and it was just going into the earth, into the dirt right outside the house. Fortunately, there wasn't any leakage into the house that we could see. But when we found out there wasn't a septic system and the agent had indicated in the listing that there was, we were able to negotiate the price down to $70,000 instead of $75,000. So we ended up closing on the property in August of 2020, and we got to work. We already had a contractor that we had done a few minor remodels with, and so we hired him to do the full flip. So in addition to not having a septic system, some of the other things as we started to get into this flip that we found out is that there were three structures on the property that were really in rough shape. There were two, what we call in Wyoming, outbuildings, and there was a lean-to. And a lean-to is a term used on horse properties where it's the structure doesn't necessarily have doors on it, but it's an area for horses to be able to go into, to get out of the sun, and that's where their food is. And so there was a lean-to. However, the lean-to was literally leaning, and it had to get tore down, as well as one of the other outbuildings, because it was just structurally unsafe. So we tore down a couple of the structures. We removed a couple sides to one of the structures so that it was a smaller barn, but we were able to keep that. And we also found out that there were 5 layers of shingles on this roof, which was putting an incredible amount of stress on the property because that is a lot of weight on the roof. And also we found out that the basement was crumbling. The walls were crumbling. And of course we could see it, but I didn't realize how bad it was. And so we ended up having to have a foundation specialist come out and put this whole system in with these poles, and they put anchors out in past the walls to try to pull them out. I mean, it was quite the ordeal, and certainly wasn't a plan in our budget. But after having done that, the foundation has a pretty much lifetime guarantee that is not going to kind of bow inwards or crumble any more than it already is. So those are just a few of the challenges that we had with this property and a few of the expenses that came up that we didn't expect. But honestly, the biggest challenge and the biggest failure of this whole thing was the contractor himself. So he is a contractor that has been doing work in the community for quite some time, but I think he had only started his own business maybe about 5 years prior to us hiring him. And in the process, we would ask him, hey, how are things going? Can you give us an update? And he would sometimes give us a very specific update of, these are the very specific things that have happened over the last couple of weeks. But sometimes he would also give us a very general response, or he would say that, hey, we're waiting on this other subcontractor to do their job so that we can continue, whether it was installing the septic system, doing some plumbing, whether it was doing the foundation work in the basement or some other things. And it was just dragging on and on and on, to the tune that we didn't actually finish the flip for over 2 years. Now, there are a lot of lessons to be learned in this process. And one of them is cut bait as soon as you realize there's a problem with a contractor. It was about 2 years into the deal, into the renovation, which was only supposed to take a year, according to the contractor, that we finally hit our wits' end and we're like, what the heck is going on? We had to sit down with him and confronted him with some of the timelines and the communication that we had. And it turns out that there were gaps of 2 months where he had never been out to the property and there was virtually no work being done. And I was so appalled at his lack of diligence and transparency with us that at that point we fired him, even though we had already dumped a bunch of money into paying him. I think we paid him some money for things he hadn't even done yet. But I was so frustrated and did not see a reasonable end to this whole scenario that we just cut bait and figured we'd just kind of figure out how to bring this thing home and how to finally kind of get to the end. It was very stressful and very frustrating. And like I said, this was the first flip we bought, but in this period of 2.5 years where we're working on this flip, we did buy and finish and sell and complete multiple other flips. And after we fired him, we had this other contractor we were aware of. And so we brought him in. And he finished the project within 2 months, and we were able to get it on the market and sell it. The second contractor was a godsend. So incredibly thankful that he was able to kind of get things figured out. This was a major headache for my husband and I, but honestly, looking back on it, I'm grateful for those challenges because that helped us at the very kind of start of this whole flipping process. It helped us realize how much we need systems. It helped us realize how much we needed other people to support us rather than just my husband and I trying to do this. At the time, I was a psychologist and a certified high performance coach. I was working like full time, working with clients in that capacity, and my head was not fully in the investment game. And my husband is a real estate broker, and he was spending most of his time on his real estate team and working with his clients. So our flips at that moment in our journey were really a side hustle, not our main thing. And so we didn't have a great way to keep our contractor accountable, to understand the process that he should be going through and all the things that he should have done at the certain time frames. So this struggle, this challenge that we had really was a great learning opportunity for you. And so I just want to share with you as we're kind of wrapping up the story of some of the lessons learned on this. And I hope it's an encouragement for you that things don't have to go perfectly. And in fact, they won't go perfectly. I can guarantee you that they won't go perfect. But if you persevere and be intentional about learning lessons, then it can become a great teaching opportunity rather than a failure. So as I mentioned, we didn't have strong timelines. We didn't really have a method for holding our contractors accountable for the timeline. Also, one of the challenges of this property is that it was 45 minutes out of the town that we lived in. We lived in the same town our contractor was in, and 45 minutes out, which, an hour and a half to 2 hour turnaround time, wasn't something that we could easily schedule into our day, and we didn't. And so we didn't go out to the property to check on it as often as we should have. And if we had done that, if we had planned for that, or had hired somebody to do that for us, this wouldn't have happened either. Also, we didn't have any support staff. Like I said, it was just my husband and I. We didn't have somebody that we had brought in to help us with the accountability. We didn't have a project manager. We didn't have an assistant, which we now do. And she's the one that helps keep the timelines. She helps keep all of our contractors accountable. She kind of helps check in, and that is so critical for us, for my husband and myself, to be able to spend a lot of our time on other aspects of our investments rather than just be the person to crack the whip. So those are my lessons learned. We ended up kind of numbers wise, as I mentioned, we bought it for $70K. It literally took 2.5 years of work. We ended up selling it for $320,000, but we ended up spending about $360,000 total on the renovation and the purchase and all of the things, the holding costs. We used a HELOC from our primary residence to fund this flip. And so we had those costs. And so we ended up losing probably about $20,000 after everything was said and done. But that was $20,000 worth of learning. And fortunately, we had some other flips in the meantime that were profitable. So we were able to float the expense and we kind of make it all work at the end. I never want to be in this position again. Part of the failure of this is that it took so long and the market shifted. 2020 was a great time to buy or to sell real estate. 2022 or 2023 is when we bought it or sold it. 2023 is when we sold it at the beginning of the year. That was not a seller's market. That was a buyer's market. And so our ARV that we had planned on originally was not what we ended up being able to sell it for. We ended up selling it for $60,000 less than what we originally had expected when we bought it. So the length of time really killed us as well, which is also a lesson learned that doing flips quick really matters. It's not just the holding costs, but it's the market changes that can really, really wreak havoc in your numbers. But here we are, we survived, and we're still flipping. We're still loving real estate investing because we were able to interpret this as an opportunity for learning rather as a failure that would cripple us forever. I would guess that if you haven't had a major failure yet in your real estate investing journey, you will. And I hope you reflect back on this story and any other stories that you have learned and you've heard from other investors, that this is not a journey where we win every time. Sometimes we strike out, but the goal is to strike out far less than our wins and financially far less money than our wins. And so the question just becomes, how can you win the game overall, even if you can't win every single time? I would love to hear your failures. And if you have a crazy story to share, maybe that would be an opportunity for us to be able to share that with the listeners, with all of our amazing investors that listen to the Seven Figure Flipping podcast. We would love to share more failures because that gives us more opportunities to celebrate the wins and to understand that we're not alone. You're not alone in some of the failures that happen in these homes that we buy and renovate and sell. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to reach out to us, we would love to hear you. The details of how you can do that are below. Thank you so much for listening. We would love your feedback on this podcast. Rate us, review us, let us know what you love, what you've learned, and share this with another fellow investor to give them a little bit of feedback and support that this is a hard road and we all fail at times, but it's not about these individual failures. It's about the journey in and of itself. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.